In addition to that, I don't know how many of you have ever heard of hippotherapy, but I had never really heard of it. How many have heard of hippotherapy? Okay. I never really heard of it, and I mentioned earlier that oftentimes our gift that we have is maybe some business that we're in or some hobby that we have. And this happened several years ago to Gary Stanfill. Gary Stanfill is an old rodeo guy. Gary Stanfill is a guy that loves horses and had a lot of horses. He was at church with a friend, and the friend had a child with a disability. And so the old rodeo guy, somebody mentioned that horses have some therapeutic benefit, and Gary didn't really believe it. But being Gary said, let's get him on a horse. And so they went and they got on a horse. Gary's riding on the rump of the horse, and he'll hear Gary tell his stories. It's absolutely amazing. He's sitting on the rump of this horse. They get this child out of the wheelchair, and those of you that know, folks that are bound to a wheelchair begin to conform to the wheelchair. And so this child is put onto the horse. Gary's sitting behind him, and the child's resting against Gary's chest. And so they begin walking around the riding arena. And Gary said every time they made another lap, the child's legs that were all drawn up began to come down. And they make another lap, and they come down some more. And they make another lap, and they come down some more. And finally, that child's legs were hanging the way they normally would as you or I got on that horse. The other thing that you need to know is this child's name was changed. They began calling the child Pete, because that was the only name, that was the only word that the child could say. And as Gary tells the story, when they make the last pass that day, and they're coming back, approaching the father that's standing there, Gary said, Pete, I want you to yell at your daddy. Yell at him. And Pete leaned over and said, Yeehaw! It's the second word that child has ever said. Needless to say, Gary Stanfill and his wife Trish were hooked. They were true believers in what horses could do for folks with disabilities.